그리고 스피커에서 20분 정도 강연하시고 세 분이 모두 끝난 후에 아마 플로어에서 질문을 받고 변화를 보여줄 것 같습니다.
It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I have been fascinated for many years with two things, really. What I call the technology revolution. Yeah, the technology revolution and the knowledge organization. And I've tried to forecast where these changes are going, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that. This is the methodology I use for what I call the TechCast project. It's a very simple thing, and I'll explain it a little bit. We first scan everything we can find, the internet mainly, and then we organize that into a breakthrough analysis, a very succinct, very concise analysis of all of the background information on every technology. We cover about 70 technologies that span the entire spectrum of science and technology. And then we have 100 experts around the world, and they go online. This is all done online on the website, and they look at the breakthrough analyses and they enter estimates. And then the system crunches the numbers and produces forecasts that are updated in real time. They constantly change like the stock market. Now I think this is, I really believe that this says that it accomplishes what it says at the top here, I think it really does provide the best possible answers to tough questions. And it does that by reducing uncertainty. We start out, we define uncertainty as 100%, and then the breakthrough analysis reduces uncertainty, and then the experts reduce uncertainty again. And so I really think it does provide the best forecast that one can make. Now here's a summary of the data. And the colors represent the color coding that is on the site for 7 different fields. The first field, the one in green, is energy and environment, and then information technology. Third is e-commerce, manufacturing, robotics, medicine, biogenetics, transportation, and space. And the vertical scale is the year we expect these different technologies to enter the mainstream. By mainstream, we mean usually the 30% adoption level. For instance, broadband reached 30% in the United States last year, and then it took off, and that's why we focus on the 30% adoption level. One of the main things that I learned when I first put this slide together many years ago is there are breakthroughs occurring in every field. Every field has breakthroughs. In energy and environment, for instance, there's so much going on because the energy and environment problem is going to increase by a factor of at least 3-fold and maybe 5-fold over the next 20 years as developing nations industrialize. For instance, China alone will double or triple the demand for energy and the load on the environment, and India will do the same thing again. And information technology is obvious. We all know that the information technology is really a revolution. But I call your attention to a couple of new technologies that just added, in particular, Web 2. I'm just fascinated by what's happening with the participated web, the bottom-up web. Power is shifting from the managers of big companies to ordinary people, the bloggers, Wikipedia, YouTube, all of that. It's really quite amazing. And then e-commerce, we forecast that the growing use of the internet means that all of these technologies here, online publishing, virtual education, e-government, all of those will reach 30% adoption levels in about 10 years or less. And that's not where they are now. You may not understand that. For instance, e-tailing. E-tailing only makes up about 6% of retail sales. So this would really be something that 30% of all retail sales were made on the internet. And then in manufacturing robotics, well, robotics is just a marvelous, exciting field, and your country is one of the leaders. I understand that Korea and Japan expect to have robots in homes by 2010, which is just remarkable. It's going to change the world. And then nanotechnology, of course, and other things. And then in medicine, it's everything that falls out of the decoding of DNA, which is truly revolutionary. These wonderful cure cancer, for instance. We're forecasting that at about 2023 as small nanoparticles are devised, injected into the bloodstream, and they seek out and destroy cancer cells. And these are marvelous things that are going to happen. That and genetic therapy, growing organs that are genetically identical to the individual, so there are no rejection problems. But these are going to take some time. That's about 20 to 30 years off for most of those technologies. And then transportation is being revolutionized by the hybrid cars, and now there's talk of diesel hybrid and hydrogen cell hybrid, and automated highways we think are coming, where you drive onto a highway and the highway takes control of the car, and you travel at 60 or 70 miles per hour, 100 kilometers per hour, 5 or 6 feet apart, and you don't do anything. You can take time to read a book or something. Space is a little different. The really interesting things are going to take quite a while, but it's so fascinating that the one breakthrough in space that stands out, that is fairly imminent, is space tourism. 2 or 3 years ago, that would have been considered hard to believe, but since the X Prize was won in the United States, maybe you follow that, it's just amazing the way serious interest in space tourism is broken out. There are 2 or 3 spaceports being built in the United States for companies like Virgin Galactic, and we're forecasting in about 2012, tour tourists like us will be going into space. That's just amazing. 5 or 6 years from now, we'll be traveling into space. So these are some of the highlights of the technology revolution. Let me move on a little bit. And I want to ask us, why is this happening now? Why is this unusual wave of revolutionary change occurring now? Well, I think it has to do with the role of knowledge in modern societies and the role of information technology. We now understand that information technology does more than process transactions. It conveys knowledge. And that's why you see an increase in knowledge in all of these scientific fields, because we have more people working as knowledge workers using more powerful information systems. And we also know that knowledge is the source of all innovation and productivity and creativity. And so the knowledge in turn increases the rate of innovation. And then the innovation increases the power of the information systems. So this becomes a virtuous cycle where information technology increases the rate of knowledge, which increases the rate of innovation, increases information systems again. And this is what's unique about our period in history, the power of knowledge being used widespread. Now I want to shift focus to the role, the influence of knowledge and the technology revolution on the way organizations work, which deals directly with the issue of human resource management. The problem, as I see it, is that the institutions we live with today were designed for the past. They've changed a little bit, but not very much. They're still pretty much the same institutions that ran the industrial age. And for instance, look at the horrible problems all of these institutions are facing. Media and entertainment is in upheaval, absolute upheaval. The newspapers, television stations, all of them are struggling to find the new role that they should play vis-a-vis the internet. And healthcare in the United States and throughout the world is being transformed In the United States, healthcare consumes $2 trillion a year. That's almost 20% of the GDP, and it's continuing to increase. It can't continue at that rate. It's going to have to change. Government, education. I'm a university professor. Almost nothing has changed in the way we run universities. Although education is really a knowledge-intensive activity, you would think that it will be changed by information technology. It has barely budged. So all of the institutions that we are familiar with are going through what the great economist Joseph Schumpeter called creative destruction. And I think we're going to see them transform over the next 10 or 20 years. This is a rough outline of the way we see institutions changing in terms of three major features: technology, economics, and governance. And the old model is the one we're familiar with, the industrial age, where the focus is on manufacturing, and the organization was a top-down system, a planned economy that focused on profit. And the second column, the service IT age, this was defined by a doctoral student of mine who conducted interviews with a number of managers, 50 managers, and this is what we learned, that there's a focus on IT networks, and it's still a top-down organization, but now we talk about teams and that sort of thing. And the focus is still on profit, but now we've added the concept of social responsibility to try and alleviate those problems. Now, the next column, the third one, is where we think we're heading, the knowledge age. And this was defined by another doctoral study done under my supervision, in which we surveyed these same 50 managers, and this is what they came up with. The e-organization is happening right now. Almost all the managers we interviewed felt that this was almost here, where everything goes online. And I'll explain that a little more in just a minute. I've got a slide on that. So the organization becomes a complete information system operating in real time. And then the self-organizing system is the way we think structure corporations and other organizations will change. Instead of the hierarchy, the organization becomes a collection of perhaps hundreds of small, self-managed profit centers, all interacting with one another and with the outside world. And then the model of governance we see emerging is what we call stakeholder collaboration. It's not at all the same thing as social responsibility. It's active participation between management and all of the stakeholders, between managers and employees, managers and suppliers, managers and distributors, customers, government, and so forth. And another way to think of it is a corporate community, very powerful idea, which would improve the net resources that the value that the corporation creates, both in terms of social welfare for employees and customers, as well as profitability. Now let me go into these just a little more detail. Here's the e-organization. See, here's the way we define it. IT integrates operations into an automated system operating in real time. The whole supply chain is being automated. E-tailing, you see, telework, virtual teams, all of that, real-time management. IBM is planning an end-to-end integration of the entire global system. And here's the way we describe self-organizing systems, the economic dimension. See, here's a definition: internal market economies of self-managed units unified into a whole. And what that means is the profit center concept moves down from divisions down to the level of teams. Every small team becomes an internal enterprise. It's held accountable for performance and free to achieve that as it sees fit. Good examples are Nokia. They bring out 3 or 4 different cell phones every year. Every phone is under the control of a small profit center, a small team. Or team-based incentives, for instance, are used by 90% of corporations today. This can be applied to staff units and support units, to R&D, And there are companies like eBay. eBay is a wonderful example of this. eBay is doing so well because they have created an internal market system where tens of thousands of small business people can do their business on their system. And eBay doesn't control those people. Those are all self-managed businesses, but they all operate within the eBay system. And even governments are doing this. There are wonderful examples of how governments have moved to this. And here's the last concept, stakeholder collaboration, the political dimension. What we're learning now, I think, is that the corporation is inherently a political system consisting of about 5 major stakeholders: the employees, the clients, suppliers, distributors, government, and their investors. And each one of those stakeholders has important resources that are essential for the success of the enterprise. And so the key is not simply to be responsible to them, to do good things for these people, because that's philanthropy. That can't be sustained, really, in a competitive market where the corporation has to create value to succeed. So the new concept is that the managers form an alliance with each of the stakeholders groups. They work with the stakeholders to create net value, more value for the stakeholders and for the corporation. Good examples are the way Chrysler works with suppliers to the point where they're an extended part of the corporation, and the way Merck Company and Johnson & Johnson work with their customers. The Saturn Corporation was a good example of that in the United States, and Japanese corporations have always done that. And it's also interesting that we found that 80% of managers agree with this concept. The ones on the operating line, know that they have to get the support of their employees and their customers and so forth. So they're really doing it. But they're confused about the relationship between that and what they've always been told to believe, which is that their main job is to make money for the corporation. Now here's what we've learned from these studies, that the present model of corporations is ambiguous. People really don't know what the model is. It's not the industrial model anymore, but they don't know what the new model is. And they all agree with this concept. They can't think of any other concepts. And the obstacles are what you would expect. Tradition, people have always done things the way they have. They don't understand the new concepts and the difficulty of change. But the things that are driving this are powerful forces: the information technology revolution, the knowledge economy, the competition. And we think this is likely to emerge over the next, 5 or 10 years. It's hard to say. We could be surprised. And here's the way this looks across institutions. You see, we have business, government, education, military, and the 3 concepts. And there are different versions of this happening for every institution. It's a little hard to understand, but I hope you get the point. I'm going to start wrapping up now. Now, one of the things I want to talk about is what happens after the information revolution ends. Because information technology is going to mature and fade into the past, just as the service economy did, and the way the industrial era did, and the agrarian society did. And in fact, if you notice on my first slide that showed the forecast for all the technologies, information technology ends at about 2020. We can't identify any new information technologies beyond 2020. I think the information revolution is going to mature. I think it's going to recede from importance at about 2020. I know that sounds hard to believe, but I think that's going to happen. And then focus will shift to this huge domain that lies beyond knowledge. Because knowledge is limited, and we're starting to understand that. There are all these other things that are beyond knowledge: vision, beliefs, values, choice, purpose. All of those things are more powerful than knowledge. and they are essential for creating success. And those are the very things that are involved in the big problems that society, the world, is facing as globalization proceeds. The environment and the energy problem is enormous. It's going to take huge, great courage to solve that problem. The issue of biogenetics, how far should we use these powerful technologies that control life and death? And the problem of violence and weapons of mass destruction. Those are enormous problems that the world is going to face, and they can only be faced by a higher level of consciousness, and I think that's going to happen in about, here's my forecast down here. 2020 plus or minus 5 years. I think the information age will yield to something I call a spiritual age. I don't mean religion, I mean consciousness. And we will use technologies of consciousness to shape our awareness. Now, I know that's a little hard to believe, but I think that's really where it's going. So that's all I want to say now. I'm going to take a few questions. I understand I have about 5 minutes, and I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you very much.
Any questions?
네, 질문 있으신 분은 질문해 주시기 바랍니다.
No questions. Well, in that case, I'm going to give you the other phrase in Korean I know. 감사합니다.
네, 질문은 안 하시는데요. 세 부분의 발표가 끝난 뒤에 패널 디스커션이 있기 때문에 그때 참여해 주시기 바랍니다. Okay, next speaker is Professor Dator. So he's going to talk about alternative futures for business at universities.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to follow Bill Halal. We are both futurists, concerned with the future in various ways. Over on the sign here, there are some Chinese or Korean or Japanese words that don't appear in English. That's interesting to me. The future might very well be in the people who can read those words versus the people who can read the English words that describe this forum. So I will also be talking a little bit about the future. But before I do that, I need to say some things about the past. Although universities in some form or another have been around for a very long time and served many different functions over the centuries, the great state universities of the 19th and the 20th centuries were created to be engines of massive social change, intending to transform their polities from being diffuse, locally focused, feudal, or pre-industrial agricultural entities into becoming globally triumphant, modern, military, industrial nation-states. As a consequence, a strong symbiotic relationship has developed between universities and economic enterprises. The organizers of this conference, and especially this panel today, seem to assume that the close relationship between universities and business should and will continue into the future. But I intend to problematize, to question that assumption. The close relationship was certainly not characteristic for most of history, and it may or may not be characteristic of the future. In addition, it is also necessary to problematize both universities and business. We should not be confident without careful consideration that either will be in the future what they are in the present. The first modern universities arose in Germany in the 19th century. In contrast to the old established liberal arts universities in France, Italy, and England, the new German universities emphasized practical arts in science, engineering, and human management. They also furthered the concept of universities as agents for state-funded and state-focused scientific research and development. These new universities were so successful in creating a powerful, modern German nation-state that it took the other modernizing nations 2 world wars to tame Germany's resulting influence and dynamism. In the United States, until the middle of the 19th century, almost all institutions of higher learning, including Harvard and Yale, were basically religious schools that trained clerics while applying a patina of civilization to wealthy young men. There was no relationship between universities and business, and none was ever contemplated. Thomas Jefferson created the University of Virginia as the first secular American university in 1824. Other perspectives inspired by Americans who had studied in Germany later began to appear in the established universities. But it was not until the middle of the 19th century that the first so-called land-grant universities were created by U.S. Congress. Their mission was threefold: to modernize not only agricultural practices, but also the farm family itself. Second, to transform surplus farmers into industrial workers and soldiers, and much later into consumers. And third, to invent new tools and techniques for military and commercial development. And the relationship between universities and business thus began in earnest. Nothing was more important for the rapid transformation of the U.S. from an isolated rural backwater into a world military industrial giant than the practical knowledge imparted and the powerful technologies invented by the land-grant universities. The role of universities as modern military and industrial nation builders is nowhere clearer or more outstandingly successful than in Japan. The highest literary rate in the late Tokugawa era, including for females, was arguably the highest in the world at that time. Much of the content of education, especially the private schools run by Ronin, was secular and practical. This provided a strong backbone upon which first a French and then a German mode of higher education could be erected by the Meiji-era modernizers. A reformed and reinvigorated Tokyo Imperial University and its affiliated research institutes took the lead in highly focused, enormously successful nation-building, training, and research. They transformed Japan from an entirely isolated and feudal polity into a major world colonial and economic power in the twinkling of an eye. In Korea, the story is fundamentally the same. Traditional Confucian education served in various forms for almost 1,000 years. Its main task was to produce scholars and administrators, certainly not businessmen or consumers. The system resisted internal change. However, the forms and substance eventually were completely replaced by a system of higher education worked first by Christian missionaries, then by Japanese colonization, and ultimately by American domination. that was firmly focused on creating an internationally competitive nation-state based on a modern military and industrial ideas and structures. Transformed from a dominated, divided, devastated rural nation into a high-tech powerhouse in merely 4 decades by the power of modern higher education, Korea today is an envy and model for the developing world. So what's next? The modern universities in all of these countries focused on the task of building a strong nation state, and they were all breathtakingly successful. A strong bond between higher education and commerce was created. The countries that established such universities became the economic and military powerhouses even into the 21st century, and they intend to remain so by keeping that bond tight. At the same time, countries that did not create such universities, usually because they were stifled by imperialism and colonialization of the earlier industrial nations, are now doing everything they can to build universities and businesses that imitate, rival, and eventually will surpass those of the current powers. As a consequence, when most people think of the future of higher education and its relationship with business, they understandably think of continuing, expanding, and improving on the very successful forms and processes that are now almost 200 years old. I'm convinced that such thinking is powerfully misleading. Before we plan for the future of universities and their relation with business, we need first to anticipate the continuities and changes that may lie ahead for humanity in the 21st century. We must then ask what knowledge, skills, values, attitudes, and institutions might be needed to address the challenges and to grasp the opportunities. However, as a person who has been engaged in futures research at the local, national, and global level for a very long time, one of the lessons that I have learned is that the futures must be viewed as plural, as alternative, as the arena of effective individual and group action. One does not predict the future and adjust to it. That may have seemed feasible several hundred years ago before industrialization, commerce, and the modern universities destroyed stable agricultural societies. But to assume so now is to make a fatal mistake in the fluid, dynamic, and profoundly uncertain world that industrialization and commerce have themselves produced. So, instead of planning and anticipating the future, one needs to conceive and explore many alternative futures, and then envision, design, and move towards a preferable future, constantly monitoring the horizon for signs of new alternatives and new preferences as people die while others are born, and new ideas, new technologies, new possibilities, new challenges emerge, very much as Professor Halal has indicated. It's absolutely essential that we not think of the future of higher education and its relationship with business only as a continuation or improvement of the present. A world composed of strong, sovereign, militarily and industrial powerful nation states with businesses in need of specific new scientific and technological information in order to keep them and their economy strong and growing. That's one possible future. But it's not the only future. And it's by no means either the most likely future or necessarily a preferred future towards which all wills should bend. There is, for example, very good reason to believe that the main challenge ahead for humanity is not the production of more military weapons and more consumer goods, but sheer survival. This may be the case if oil essentially vanishes before equivalent energy sources emerge. Sea levels rise, climate changes, potable water disappears, new and old global pandemics ravage, fertility rates decline as here or rise as elsewhere, and religious extremists, environmental refugees, and local citizens fight and kill for dwindling land and resources. Not a pretty picture, but certainly not an unrealistic one, and clearly one that suggests the need for a different kind of higher education and focus for life than the one we have now. Indeed, some would argue that the current higher educational system is in some measure responsible for many of these potential maladies because of its single-minded focus on enabling economic growth and military adventures, while largely ignoring the resulting cultural and environmental degradation and collapse. I would say that one of the greatest challenges ahead for successful universities may be to stop churning out people and products bent solely on continued economic growth, and to start instead producing people and products that enable the basic survival and eventual evolvability of the planet and all life in it. In its most popular current expression, the challenge facing all humanity is now called sustainability. But our universities are largely incapable of fostering sustainability. All they know is continued economic growth, because so far that's all they were ever expected to know or to enable. If our universities do not embrace sustainability instead of or in addition to economic growth, they may continue to play a major role in leading humanity to its own destruction, if people who warn of this future are correct. Yet I see little evidence that most university faculty, administrators, governors, or financiers can or will seriously consider and effectively accept this fundamental change of focus and purpose of higher education. But any good business person knows how to make a profit and to respond positively to whatever the economic system is. Thus, in various places around the world, more and more economic enterprises are either becoming green or starting up as green. This is giving them a major advantage over the many other economic enterprises that remain stuck with the universities in the old economic growth paradigm. But this is only one view of the future. Though powerfully attractive, it is not the only alternative worthy of serious consideration. One of my colleagues at the University of Hawaii, a graduate student from Korea, Young-Suk Soo, or Soo Young-Suk, and myself have recently argued that a possible future that lies ahead after the so-called information society or knowledge society, and very similar to the alternative that Bill Halal called the conscious revolution, we call a dream society of icons and aesthetic experience. Moreover, we believe that Korea could be, and in fact is becoming, the first dream society to emerge on the planet, And if so, we need radically to rethink both education and business for this future. The educational system of a dream society towards which Korea could be a world leader should focus not on standardized procedures and measure, not on hard work and the production of new physical things, not on the creation of new information and scientific knowledge. Rather, education for Korea as a pioneering dream society should focus on fostering and elaborating images, imagination, creativity, culture, art, dance, drama, music, anime, games, sports, ethics, philosophy. That is to say, education and life in this future would focus on play, performance, and the presentation of self in virtual and real reality, and in the company of diverse human, transhuman, and post-human kinds of emotions and intelligences. There are many other futures before us than just those three: continued growth, sustainability, a dream society. But for now, I wish simply to suggest that when we think about the future of universities and their relationship to commerce, that we do so at least in the light of these three alternative futures, instead of only of a future that is basically a continuation of continued economic growth. The details of how we should engage in this consideration, and then what future institutions of higher education and commerce might actually look like, where they will be located, how they will be funded, by whom they will be governed, who will learners and teachers be, and what will be taught and learned, along with the role of fundamental and applied research, commerce and community building, and many other factors. A discussion of these things will have to wait until a later time. But I stand ready to discuss these details with you whenever that time comes, and with whomever wishes to discuss them with me. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
우리가 어떤 준비를 해야 할지 여쭤보고 싶습니다.
Thank you very much for your question. First of all, as I attempted to make clear in my presentation, no one can predict the future. I cannot predict the future. I think that what you described were many elements in the alternative futures that lie before us. I, for many, many years, have been an enthusiastic supporter of the things that you meant, of the positive things you mentioned. For example, I teach at something called the International Space University, located in Strasbourg, France, which has people from the space community from all over the world in order to help humanity get into space soon. So I'm very enthusiastic about that aspect of what Professor Halal said. I teach courses on how to live on Mars. And so I look forward to such a world. But we also are living in a world that is running out of energy, of oil. Before we have alternative sources, we have potential alternative sources, without a doubt. But we're not doing the research and development of those alternatives. In the United States, we refuse to address energy conservation, which is a major development that must happen. We waste our money, our resources on fighting useless wars, and in so many ways we are irresponsible towards future generations. So the high-tech world that you describe and the dream society, the consciousness society that lies beyond the knowledge society will never happen unless we also take care of our environmental and energy problems very, very soon.
Okay. Thank you very much. 혹시 질문 있으십니까? 예, 그 웨브 세션에서 다시 질문을 받도록 하겠습니다. Okay, so next we have an excellent speaker from Hong Kong, Tait. He's going to talk about the best place to work.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed my pleasure, and delighted, and humbled to be here with such a distinguished group of panelists. I feel like I'm about to take you from 35,000 feet to somewhere down around 10,000 and maybe slightly short of that. I have to say I'm also reminded at this moment of a comment that our former group chairman, Sir Chang-Mo, once made when asked to talk about the successes of our group. He said, never forget that today's peacock can be tomorrow's feather duster. So with that, I'll launch into my presentation here this morning, which is all about a story, really. It's the HSBC story as it's come over the last 8 or 9 years, and as we would like to see it go over the next period of time. This isn't just about HSBC, but I'd ask you to think about this in the context of your own organizations, and particularly the people element of some of this, and how it might apply to you. Brief history about HSBC, just to put it all in context. We started as the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation in 1865. We had 3 offices then, one in Hong Kong, one in Shanghai, one in London, hence the name. And we really started off as a trade finance bank, an organization that saw that there were traders in Asia who needed means and ways by which they could finance their future growth. Our strategy was a simple one. We wanted to follow our customers wherever they went to provide them the sorts of services, financial and support that they needed to grow their businesses. We stayed the Hong Kong and Shanghai Banking Corporation in Hong Kong, but as we grew, as you can see over the course of history, we became many different things in many different countries. In Hong Kong, we also operate under Hang Seng Bank trade name. In North America, it can be Household. In Brazil, it's Banco. In Mexico, it's Vital. In Australia, it's Hong Kong Bank Australia. In the UK, it was Newland. All of that carried on until about 1998, when we became branded as the HSBC Group. So we went from being this federation of loosely knit organizations with really only the hexagon logo being the common feature across our structure that would be visible to the external world, to one where now we are the world's 3rd largest bank, $202 billion by market cap. Our brand is rated as number 28 in the world by Inbrand in terms of recognition, and all of that has happened in a very, very short period of time. We think that less than 8 years ago, we existed as a single branded organization, so tremendous changes happened. How has that occurred? Well, in 1998, we had prior to 1998, we had a chairman who was quite a visionary. His name was Sir William Purvis. And Sir William was sort of a man among men. He was a strong, dynamic leader. He had a vision that he wanted to take this company to be a global organization. And it was through him that we made some significant acquisitions, the most major of those being Midland Bank in the UK in 1992, which caused our head office to need to go to London. Shortly retired in 1998, and he was replaced by another visionary, a chap who's just retired in May this year, Sir John Bond. When Mr. John came on board, he introduced what was called at the time, and it goes down in our history, as our Managing for Value strategy. The most important part of this was the creation of the HSBC brand. It also started to articulate some specific things that would knit this organization globally, not just regionally or by a country level, around our people dynamics and around our culture. And as you can see, what we wanted to do as articulated then was to be able to attract, retain, and motivate the very best people, and to create a unified HSBC brand globally, culture globally. This is all focused on providing some stronger shareholder value and ensuring that we could have structures that were fluid and communicating and consistent across the world. It was actually a very successful period during our history. We made some significant acquisitions, grew our presence to the point where today our earnings stream is balanced pretty much 1/3 from the Americas, 1/3 from Europe and the UK, and 1/3 from Asia. So we're now a very strongly balanced commercial banking franchise. Also interestingly, our income streams are balanced quite nicely across corporate institutional banking, commercial banking, and personal financial services. Again, an effort to ensure our ongoing growth and sustainability, and to use the Professor's words, our growing society. In 2003, new strategy was introduced. Still, Sir John was at the helm at this point. This was our management for growth strategy. At this point in time, the HSBC Group globally had roughly 100 million clients. What we didn't need was 101 million. What we did need, although we got the extra million or 2 or 3, what we did need was to sell more product to our existing client base. So if we were selling just short of 3 products per client at the time, can you imagine what it would do to our shareholders if we could sell 4 per customer or 5? So this started to change the thinking around the organization, around the type of company we wanted to be. We ended up wanting to take ourselves to be more of a sales organization with an ethical culture. This meant that it was going to have significant implications for the people in the business. Some of our staff actually couldn't or wouldn't be able to make that transition from being simply a service staff to a sales organization. This is a significant transition for us. It also meant that we had a significant shift in some of our internal policies, such as our pay policies, our training initiatives, and so forth. Quite simply, however, what has overridden all of this is our aspiration to become a place which is really a meritocracy. An organization where we reward success, we celebrate success, and be a bit more crass about it when we reject mediocrity. So it's a much sharper focus than we had previously had in any time of our history. We've now moved up that chain somewhat to the point where we want to position ourselves to those who would aspire to work in the financial services industry to be the best place to work. No small challenge that one. The Corporate Leadership Council has done quite a bit of research on creating high-powered performing teams, and they identify a model which is characterized by ability, engagement, and aspiration. You can have individuals who actually can be quite well-performing if they have high engagement and are well-aspiring. But those people, if they don't have ability, are unlikely to be your future leaders and take you into new markets and new dynamic areas of growth. If you, however, have people who have abilities, aspire, and are fully engaged with what a company is trying to do, your chances of success as an organization in whatever industry you're in are radically improved. You can actually have people who have the ability and who are aspiring, but they're not really engaged. They don't really want to be part of this model. They can't really have much affinity to it. The chances of them being part of your future leadership team are actually quite small. Equally, you can have people who are engaged and have ability, but they don't aspire. Chances of them getting to be your future leaders also is very small. What we're trying to do is to identify those people in the organization who have all 3 characteristics. The ability, are engaged and aligned with what the company is trying to do, and aspire to go to the future, more senior levels. To do this, we've created what we call our HSBC people pillars, in other words, built around the best place to work. There are a number of dimensions to this which we're now focusing on, and this is all about our future, and perhaps as other organizations, different industries might want to approach it, their future as well. Our future is built around our commitment to diversity, Longevity of employment, this is just not around the whole notion of staying around because you happen to be warm on the suit. It's because you're valuing your contribution and what you can do for us in the future. It's about creative career opportunities and looking at focus on strong performance. And it's looking at creating market pay that's attracting to individuals and also focus on learning and development. We're going to talk a little bit about each one of these more specifically now. Creating the best place to work. Our current group CEO recently flew around the world. He went from Buenos Aires to Brazil, 28 places in between. He visited and met in large assemblies such as this with some 6,000 people around the group. Of those messages that he left, the number one message for our executive team across the group was that we wanted to drive employee engagement. The view being that if we can identify what engagement is at each location and we can hook people into the sense of alignment to those engagement features, our chances of success as an organization actually go up quite dramatically. There's been a lot of research done between engagement and corporate profitability, and the correlation is very strong. Looking at our engagement factors across HSBC in the region, we have for many years been running employee attitude surveys. In parts of the group, they use an indice called satisfaction indice. In Asia, we use an engagement indice. As it's turning out, the engagement indice is one which the group is about to adopt globally, simply because it provides a language and a consistency around which we can start to measure our various businesses in the group, and also around which we can start to reward leaders in the group with respect to the whole dimension of engagement. If we take a look at some of our businesses around the region, where we've recently run attitude surveys, you'll see that there are different elements that actually drive engagement within each of these countries. And these actually features of happiness and engagement are quite unique to different companies. You'll find that people in Thailand are fundamentally happier than people in Hong Kong. You'll find that people in Mexico are actually a more joyous group than people in mainland China. So there are certain local nuances that have to be taken in the context of all of this. The couple of points I'd like to extract from this is that as you take a look at what we've got up on the screen here, you'll see that the feature of pay benefits and rewards only shows among one of the companies of the 6 that I've shown here. One would previously have thought that to have a highly engaged workforce, you need to be paying at the top of the market. The reality in our organization is that you need to be competitive on the pay dimension. And if you're not, you simply cannot expect to have engaged employees. But it's not a core driver. What are the core drivers are things like leadership, empowerment to individuals, to employees, respect for what they can contribute, a learning culture in the sense that there's an insatiable desire, at least among our employees in Asia, to continue to want to learn. In whatever dimension that might be. We've recently done some interesting things. The advent of e-learning has been around with us for quite some time. But e-learning is very rapidly taking over where our former bums on the seats or land sort of commitments universities used to be and training colleges used to be. We now are allowing employees to access our learning online from home. So if they're sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon, it's a bit quiet and they're wanting to advance, they can simply click on to learning online at HSBC and away they can run anytime of day or night in many of our locations. So the point is, as you think about this with respect to your own employees, it's a tailored response. Absolutely, pay is important, but you need to take a look at what individual employees are looking for in their own employment proposition. For many, it's the quality of the leadership, and that's not just the people at the top, but it's my direct supervisor and how I'm being engaged with them. It's about their empowerment and how they're being able to get on with things at work in their own right and feel confident and free to be able to do that without fear of draconian consequences if they don't get it right on the first attempt. And it's about continuous learning. Looking at the best place to work. I mentioned a few of the dimensions around which we're building our people pillars. The first being the value of longevity. As As I mentioned, longevity isn't really just about rewarding people for sticking around. It's really about encouraging those people who can make a valuable contribution, not only as strong performers, but are engaged and have the aspiration to want to stay with us, that we want to hook the most. Why is that important? Well, it's important because our culture internally is something that we value as being unique and a key differentiator for us. And it's only if we have culture carriers around, it's only if we encourage and recognize those business leaders who are talent builders that we can build that sustainable dream that is our HSBC aspiration today. Resolute non-performance. In many parts of the Western world for a long, long time, the whole notion of ridding the organizations of mediocrity has been around. In parts of Asia, and dare I say, I don't think that's the case in Korea, but in parts of Asia, that's not the case. There is still this iron rice bowl mentality in some parts of the organization. It's breaking down very rapidly, but it is still there in some parts of the world. When you have an organization like ours, which has 77 countries, 284,000 staff, it's very difficult to say which country does and which country does not adequately handle this dimension of being resolute non-performers. So as a guidance principle, our aspiration is to recognize those who are really making a contribution, to deal fairly with and to counsel in a non-confrontational way, to the best of our ability, those who aren't measuring up, and to move forward in a way that we can truly develop the strongest team possible. Another feature for us, real market pay. For many, many years, HSBC has operated using an evaluation system called the HAY system, which I know for many of you will recognize it's a wonderful instrument. Every organization needs an evaluation system. We, however, took that to an extreme in some parts of the group, and we simply created our own pay mechanisms based around that, with little observation of what was going on in the real market around us. So what we needed to do in order to retain the top quality that we need to drive our business success in the future is to take a look at what competitive pay practices are around the group and around the world among our competitors. What that's led us to conclude is that in some countries, actually, where we have large market dominance, major influence, and an opportunity for people to develop their careers and have learning and development opportunities, our pay positioning doesn't need to be aggressive, as it does in some locations where perhaps that's not the case. The point is that what we're doing over time in the group is to move from having more emphasis on base pay and from that positioning more onto variable pay, and ensuring that we're adequately rewarding those who are making the greatest contribution. We also think it's important to take a look at people's career development opportunities, to not leave it down to happenstance and just good luck that people move forward in their careers. As I mentioned previously, we have quite a well-defined group talent pool concept that we're developing and having some real success with. But apart from that, we need to be creative in how we're developing careers to become truly a global bank. For many years, HSBC has operated with a roving international group of managers. These are sort of executives that I would call soldiers of fortune. They would go anywhere, anytime, to move the organization. It didn't matter what time of day or night they would call. They would typically be there the next day or the next week. Little consequences to their family, little consequences to solid careers. They just simply got on with it. Well, the world has changed. Those people are fewer in number who want to sign up for that kind of career stream. And so the challenge for us just got bigger in terms of how do we knit a group of 77 countries in a way that has uniformity across its cultures. But we are working on it through things like identification of talent in different countries, using common standards against which those assessments would be made, and identifying this group of future true leaders. I'll give you some examples. Recently, we've moved our CEO from Japan, or about to move from Japan, to be our head of international for our Central and South American region, replacing him as the individual who's our head of corporate institutional banking in Hong Kong. Both people are getting on the bank, both of the with those new roles, both people see those as very attractive propositions and opportunities for both of them. We're moving our head of personal financial services from Hong Kong, who has a regional agreement, become our CEO in Mexico. And a local Brazilian is coming from Sao Paulo to replace him in Hong Kong as a regional head of personal financial services. We're sharing best practices around the group by moving these people and trying to knit the organization globally in so doing. A little close to the home, we just recently moved our head of credit from our operation here in Seoul to head up our audit function for Asia Pacific, based in Hong Kong. And the person he's replacing is moving on to become our chief operating officer in Hong Kong. The fellow he's replacing is moving to London to become part of our global transaction banking. The point is here, to create those kinds of movements, you need to think about it. It doesn't just happen by waking up in the morning and saying, well, I guess I'll move this person from A to B. It has to understand what their personal abilities are, what their aspirations are, and what their engagement level is with the organization to be able to drive it forward. Some of those opportunities actually don't just exist internally either. We now have an individual who has come from the Bank of Japan on a one-year secondment from his employer to work for us in Hong Kong. So we're trying to develop relationships with external regulators while at the same time being able to bring in external best practice from other locations. For your organizations, you need to think about what sort of creative career opportunities can you think and create for your staff. Only that way we will attempt to build strong, sustainable businesses going forward. Commitment to learning and development. I've been with the HSBC Group now for, despite this youthful look, for about 25 years. I came to join it not out of choice, but as a consequence of an acquisition of the group made in Canada back in 1986. I was previously with an organization prior to that, service was recognized, so I spent 25 years. In my period of time with the group, I can honestly, hand on heart, say that at no point in that history have I been part of an HR function for a business where the commitment to training, and I mean that in dollars and cents terms, or a leadership commitment to be part of it, has diminished. Each successive year, through good times and bad, budgets have either been sustained or increased in our learning and development field. And I'll just leave it at that. Much of what we're reading today is a consequence of that unrelenting commitment to learning and growth in the organization. A couple of other examples that I just recently witnessed. We have two strategic investments in China. One is with Neon in insurance, and the other is with Bank of Communications. Recently I had the pleasure to go to Neon Insurance to the Neon University. Now this is a campus of multiple acres that most public universities would envy. It has, among other things, its own 9-hole golf course, and of course a little-sized swimming pool and tennis courts. It also has 5 amphitheaters that are state-of-the-art. It provides training not just to Neon employees, but also to the insurance industry in China. When you think about opportunity in the future, that's got to be an enormous one. And as you walk into Neon University, you'll see on the staircases 2 very large statues. They like to do things in a grand way in China, particularly in Neon. One of the statues is roughly about 15 feet tall, and it's a statue of Confucius. On the other side, equally sized statue of Einstein. The point is this is all about East meeting West in China, in an organization that's looking to grow and be part of the future, and being prepared to make a commitment and take accountability corporately for that sustainable growth. A similar sort of thing is happening in Bank of Communications, I should say. So these corporate institutions are actually picking up many places where the public institutions used to do, and still do. Commitment to diversity. We are the world's local bank. It's a wonderful tagline. It serves us tremendously well, whether you're in Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, France, Hong Kong, Singapore. Who can't relate to the world's local bank? Easy taglines to put out there, very difficult to deliver on. So what we endeavor to do is to provide a global overlay, but allow it to be tailored to local specific requirements. It's kind of a loose, tight tension for us internally. Within that, we're looking to employ individuals in a way that they would reflect the communities that they serve. We're not forcing ourselves down a diversity initiative for the sake of quotas or responding to government intervention. We're doing it simply because it's good for our business. Now, we've got a long way to go to make dimensions here. We need to become more flexible as an organization to be able to respond to personal needs. We have to embrace the notion that in some businesses there are glass ceilings, and we have to eradicate that. There's still a degree of disbelief, I guess, that in some parts of the group that exists, but it is there in some parts, and we need to deal with that. We need to create employment propositions which are much more attractive to individuals at all levels who have the ability to aspire and who are engaged with us. So, by way of summary, our aspiration, quite a lofty one at this point, is to become simply the best place to work. There are multiple dimensions for us to have to manage through to do this, and believe me, it's quite a daunting task to achieve this undertaking. But I'm convinced that with the commitment that this group has made over the years to the areas that we focused on and discussed this morning, and also on the whole notion of engagement, that we're going to get to that place, to be the best place to work. Thanks so much for your attention.